Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and I'm really glad you could join me today. It's time for a very timely discussion of the language of control freaks, because we're going to get kind of an applied lesson here as to how language has become one of the many battlegrounds in the endless psychological warfare that seems to be waged around us pretty much 24/7. And I want to start with something that hopefully sounds, or at least strikes a familiar nerve. If you have been following any of the corporate media outfits, not just here in Idaho, but across the country, you'll know that there's a real tendency to lean on labels. And these are judgmental labels that are used to basically lead the viewer, the listener, the reader into a preconceived conclusion of whatever we're talking about. This is what you need to feel. And it's things like extremist or far right or anti-government or whatever it is. In fact, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. I'm going to start with a great one from Glenn Greenwald calling out The Atlantic. The Atlantic is saying Elon Musk has transformed Twitter into a right-wing alt-tech platform that has much in common with the likes of Truth Social and Rumble. And Glenn Greenwald, who, by the way, I think really is one of the very few people who deserves to be called a journalist, says anything and anyone these people, meaning the control freaks, can't control and censor gets called either right-wing or a Russian agent. They're dealing with their collapsed relevance and the contempt that the public has for them quite poorly by lashing out like shrieking hysterics as their ship sinks. Dang. They're going to feel that one for a bit. That was a pretty good backhand on the part of Glenn Greenwald, but he's right. And you see this, and I'm going to give you a couple of really good examples of this in some of our local press here in Idaho that shows how that lack or that diminishing relevance rather is being taken out on anyone who would stand up and either question the narrative or, heaven forbid, try to live their lives without, the express permission of these folks with a controlling nature. And it starts with language, and I guess this is the key place where we need to begin. I want to start with an observation here. This is a tweet from Z Van Fleet. Now, if I am remembering correctly, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe that she is actually a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution, which means if she's talking about tyranny, she's coming at this from a position of having stood in the midst of some of the worst tyranny the world has ever seen. Her observation is this: we share vocabulary with Dems, meaning Democrats, but they control the definition. They define, redefine, redefine, and redefine our shared words until the words totally lost their original meaning. So as a result, we no longer know what they mean when they use words like our democracy, or racism, or fascism, or extremism. That's a favorite of the folks here in Idaho. Justice, freedom, kindness, women. That's their way to control our speech and therefore our thoughts. So let's dive right in. This is an op-ed from Chris Houston. This was published in the Times News. Finding My Way, The Great Awakening. Chris is going to set us straight on the word woke and how it's not even really a word and it doesn't mean anything. And if you use it, you're a big dummy. Seems to me he protesteth too much, but you judge for yourself. Chris says, one of the most entertaining games we grown-ups like to play goes like this. I'm going to tell you about yourself. Why? Because I can, and because it's a free country, and you can't stop me. And then the speaker dumps a bag of highly unflattering adjectives over the head of the recipient, who naturally responds by doing the same. Great fun, right? He says, we love it when we get to define other people in unflattering terms of our own choosing, and we hate it when they do the same thing to us. But the hate we feel is still kind of fun. It's exhilarating. We're in the game, by golly, and it's just so much fun to play. Go big or go home, right? Now, he says this allows us to apply grossly stereotypical judgments to someone else's individually nuanced circumstances about which we chose to remain ignorant. This also allows us to enjoy all the fun of self-righteousness with none of the work required to earn it. Now, you have to understand specifically what he's doing here is he's trying to defend those who would call out wokeness or call out or criticize, woke attitudes. And I'll just give you an example. Okay, Ford with their new rainbow-colored Raptor F-150. It's woke marketing to show us, look, LGBT matters and we have pride too and so forth. Do they really need to do that to market to their base? I mean, it's a free country. They can choose to do so, but it's a very woke type of marketing. Most normal people are going to perceive this as, oh, great, now Ford is trying to force this rainbow mafia agenda down our throats. So when Chris is talking about woke, in terms of, well, people are calling it out, he's saying, well, they're applying stereotypical judgments to someone's individually nuanced circumstances about which we choose to remain ignorant. How does that not apply to how, for instance, members of the legacy media treat anyone who is on the side of freedom, or for that matter, who just isn't spouting or chanting the same left-wing talking points in unison with them? It's really the same thing. In fact, this may just be a case of classic psychological projection. We get to enjoy all the fun of self-righteousness with none of the work required to earn it. That perfectly describes the woke attitude. People go on social media and there they emote. Look at me. I have a Ukraine flag in my bio and I have my pronouns and I have a rainbow flag. Aren't I great? All the appearance of look what a good person I am without any of the actual work of having to live like a decent human being. But I digress. Let's go back to Chris's commentary. This is quite a gem here. It's our cultural fad, this widespread display of public ignorance masquerading as some kind of profound intelligence. Again, this can apply very much to the woke themselves. I'm referring to the word that isn't a word, a term that simultaneously means everything and nothing and is therefore worthless rather. That word, of course, is woke. And he says woke is like tar. Using the word doesn't just sully the accused, it also sullies the user. Chris does not like things being labeled as woke. Now, he says, and this is where he tries to kind of redefine, once woke had a general definition. It first showed up in America's black communities around the turn of the century and came to mean being socially and politically aware of ongoing racial injustices. Now, he says speaking out against voting restrictions or hiring discrimination, as opposed to just accepting injustice without complaint, displayed a social awakening and a grittier determination to stand up to those who kept telling them to sit down and shut up. Okay, I have to ask, Chris, why doesn't this apply back to, I don't know, a time when people were kept in slavery? Wasn't it pretty woke of the abolitionists to stand against what was generally accepted at that time in society? And I'm not trying to be facetious here. I'm just saying his definition is very conveniently close to where we are today, but leaves out, I think, some really big historical context. Now, that doesn't mean I'm labeling all the abolitionists or everybody who stood against slavery as being woke. But the people who actually stood up against the institution of slavery, the people who actually stood up against Jim Crow laws and other injustices, generally were people who were willing to buck the system. Right now, the system itself has become captured by the woke. So if you point out that, hey, the woke are forcing their point of view on people, you're criticizing the system. So maybe the people that you're worried about using that word, woke, are people who are doing the dirty work that abolitionists and civil rights activists used to do. Just a thought, something to think about here. So Chris goes on to tell us, in that light, oh, look, here's some historical revision too. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, along with all the other signers of the Declaration of Independence, all of them were most assuredly woke. And maybe in the sense that, yes, they were aware of an injustice and willing to stand up. They had the moral clarity to stand up and say this is not right. But I don't think they would bark up the same woke tree that most people would understand wokeness to represent today. Abraham Lincoln, woke. The creators of Social Security, oh, that's an interesting turn. So people who forced collectivism and basically making people dependent upon government for their retirement, yeah, they were woke too. The program that sends you a check every month, yeah, Chris, at whose expense? Woke. He after whom Christianity is named was perhaps the most woke individual who ever walked the earth. Okay, it's a little blasphemous and a little bit of a stretch, but Jesus also taught, the whole thing of do unto others as you would have done unto you. Today's wokeness doesn't seem to follow that advice. So I would hesitate to say that he was woke in the same sense that to say Black Lives Matters or, drag queen story hour or anything like that is woke. Probably not even on the same page, but hey, I'll give you an A for effort. So let's get into a definition. He says Merriam-Webster, the dictionary folks, define woke as aware and actively attentive to important societal facts and issues, especially to issues of racial and social justice. Now, it would be very interesting to look at an 1828 Noah Webster dictionary and see exactly how it would define that same word, because this sounds like, a modern spin on it. And yes, Merriam-Webster does regularly update their content to, what's that word? Oh, stay woke. Yes, to stay trendy with whatever the latest moral imperative is by the oh-so-enlightened. Chris says, but for the users of the word today, woke is just something conservatives drop into a sentence like bacon bits on a salad when you want to spice up an insult, especially when you suffer from a shortage of logical ideas or provable facts. Okay, I'd like to offer an alternate definition to what Chris is offering. Woke is a state of awareness achieved only by people stupid enough to find injustice in everything except their own actions. Now, I'm not saying that's the only definition, but I'm saying that is an accurate definition and shouldn't be ruled out. So here's a simple example he gives of what woke looks like, or how this word is misused. Georgia's new voting laws will make it harder for minorities to vote because of reducing the number of polling places in low-income areas and silly restrictions about not being able to give a bottle of water to someone standing in a long voting line. Oh yeah? Well, you're just woke. Also, it makes it harder to cheat on elections. Yeah, definitely woke. And the person doing the rebutting walks away happy, having just played his rhetorical get-out-of-any-discussion requiring facts-free trump card, kind of like a person who would call somebody else, extreme or racist. I mean, the same kind of thing applies here. Just saying. He says, I think it comes down to this. We all agree in theory on the idea of equal rights in the workplace, in society, and in the voting booth. And as Americans, we're big fans of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, at least you say you are. But darn it, some people think that all this idealism should be more than a theory. Such people are woke. Now, I have to take exception, because it's not just a matter of, we're just trying to get people to be nice to each other. This is how political correctness was excused for a long time. It's just about people showing consideration, but it's not. And the difference between what he is describing and the actual application of wokeness is that it is brought about by force. It is forced on people. Cancel culture is threatened if you don't toe the line, if you do not bend the knee, if you don't chant in unison with the rest of the woke. That doesn't seem like a very good idea. Now, Chris does go on to say, for the rest, the majority who ignore the cognitive dissonance of telling our children what we as Americans believe, then not doing nearly enough, look at his finger wag, to make it a reality. The idea of being woke, of attempting to match what we say we are with what we actually are, becomes a genuine problem. What's this we stuff, paleface? He's talking about those who will not allow the implementation of all the current left-wing talking points and moral hand-wringing. Well, they're failing to match their values with their words. But not everybody matches those values. In fact, those values themselves may be very anti-American. He says, attempting to ignore the problem by just tossing around a word designed to imply anyone who disagrees with your selective blindness is morally, socially, and politically ignorant ultimately makes the insulter look dumber than the person being insulted. That's a lot of words to say. I know you are, but what am I? Oh, Chris Houston, thank you so much for enlightening us with your sophisticated point of view on the word woke, and for insisting that it really doesn't actually exist, except that it really should, because it's the right thing to do, and anybody who doesn't use this word the way that I use it is somehow a bad person. Like I say, I think the guy protests a little bit too much, but I sure had a lot of fun reading his point of view on this and trying to explain away why you can't call us woke. It seems to me like some of that truth might be leaving a mark. Maybe it stings a little bit, Chris. Maybe you should take that as a hint. All right. Speaking of woke, let's use an example of woke reporting from none other than the Idaho Statesman. And boy, here's one that they just can't let go. Meridian woman who defied COVID measure at playground says she was falsely arrested. You don't get a lot of context there from the headline, but there was a COVID measure. She defied it. Now she claims she was, scare quotes, falsely arrested. Of course, they're talking about Sarah Walton Brady, pictured here with Attorney General Raul Labrador. A Meridian, here we go, anti-vaccination activist. There's our first leading bit of judgment here. You can't take this woman seriously because she's an anti-vaccination activist who was arrested in 2020 for allegedly trespassing at a closed playground during the coronavirus pandemic, has filed a tort claim against the city, arguing she was wrongly arrested while exercising her constitutional rights. Sarah Walton Brady faced a trespassing charge after she refused to leave Julius M. Kleiner Memorial Park when it was closed because of COVID concerns. Now, hold up here for just a second, Idaho statesman. I know that there's political points to be gained here, but by what authority was that park closed? And by what authority was this mitigation effort, being undertaken? Did it do any good? Did people still get COVID? We know the answer, okay? We have enough time to see in hindsight. There was no reason to shut it down. It was just people with a title saying, well, this is what we have to do. We don't see any alternative. But the truth is, there were other alternatives, and they chose not to see them. And so they tried to implement control. This was about control. First and foremost, it was about getting people to bend the knee and do what people in public health were telling them to do. Never mind that the experts were fallible. They were wrong. They were subject to bias. They were subject to political lust to control other people. And for Sarah Brady not bending the knee, well, it really upset them. And when she refused to immediately tuck her tail and run when a police officer suggested she do so, he arrested her. That was a case of his ego getting involved and had nothing to do with keeping the community safe. I mean, can anybody say with a straight face, oh, yes, the community was a safer place because she was put behind bars that day? Now Brady is asking the city of Meridian for $500,000 for what she said was a wrongful arrest. I mean, there's a part of me that actually wishes this could have gotten in front of a jury, because I think the jury would have broke it off in the prosecutor for trying to push this in the first place. They kept pushing the trial back over and over again. Finally, an adult entered the room. Thank you, Attorney General Labrador, and dismissed the charges. Now, here's where we have to get into smear mode, and this is where the Idaho Statesman just excels. Brady was known for running the Facebook group Idahoans for Vaccine Freedom. What are you supposed to draw from that? That people should make informed choices about vaccines rather than just run mooing with the rest of the herd down the chute to get whatever somebody's waiting to inject into them? Okay. And for pushing for parental rights to refuse vaccines. Again, absolutely a worthwhile right to exercise. That doesn't mean that everybody should be denied vaccines or everybody should actually be on the very same page here. Just that people should be able to make their own informed consent choice and not be forced. This was done both at the West Ada School District as well as at the Idaho Capitol. They see this as a negative. People who understand freedom and understand personal autonomy would see this as a very big positive. And from here, they explain that a tort claim is a civil claim made against a state or local government for a wrongful or negligent act. A tort claim is a precursor to a lawsuit, but not all plaintiffs follow up unanswered claims by suing. Now, Brady pleaded not guilty to trespassing in 2020. The state, for some inexplicable reason Lawrence Wasden would only know about, drugged this on for well over 2 years. And Idaho Attorney General Raul Labrador dismissed the charge shortly after taking office earlier this year. The tort claim also names the Idaho Secretary of State and Ada County Clerk. I mean, this woman cannot be controlled, so we have to paint her as an anti-vax extremist and someone who is just, disobeying these COVID measures that were just to protect us. But let's ignore the fact that they didn't protect us and they didn't help people. And in fact, they damaged many people's businesses, livelihoods, mental well-being, and did nothing to stop the spread of the virus, which did what viruses do, regardless of what very important people with important titles put on paper. It spread until it became endemic, and then it became much less of an issue. But even at its worst, the survival rate for people who contracted the coronavirus was still 99.7%. Hardly the deadly thing that would justify putting a woman in handcuffs and subjecting her to tens of thousands of dollars of legal bills and dragging her through the system where the process is pretty much the punishment. Somehow this is lost on members of the press. I don't know exactly why, but it has to do with some mindset that the state can never be wrong. And they act more like lapdogs than they do like watchdogs. So I guess they want to assure Master, I love you, as they sit panting in Master's lap. Brady said in the tort claim, I was unconstitutionally and falsely arrested while lawfully standing in a public park, exercising my constitutional rights. I was then prosecuted for trespassing, which cost me tens of thousands of dollars. Now, I know there are those who will say, well, she just must want attention, and that's not right, and, she's just looking for attention. Trust me, there are easier ways to get attention and less costly ways to get attention. I think that she was forced into a situation where she had to stand up for her rights. And just in case you haven't noticed, you will pay a price if you stand up against the system in any way, shape, or form. That doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a criminal, although it seems like the control freaks really want to paint it as such. Well, of course, we have these laws and we have these things for our protection and our democracy, as if it's their democracy. No. Nope. There are times when sometimes the right thing to do, in fact, sometimes the patriotic thing to do, is the exact opposite of what everybody else is doing. Unfortunately, usually during those times when there's this mass formation psychosis at play, the majority of people aren't going to recognize it. They're going to chant in unison with the crowd. They're going to reach like crabs in a bucket and try to drag back anybody who is escaping the clutches of that mass formation. So in this case, I wish Sarah the best of luck. I hope that she's able to recoup some of the damages, but more importantly than money, being transferred into her bank account, the people who pushed, enforced, and reported they need to be held accountable, and they need to be prevented from doing it again. Because if someone doesn't push back, if someone doesn't hold them accountable and at least help them feel the pain of having done something wrong, they're just going to do it again. And frankly, they'll probably try to take even more next time. As I read that article from the Idaho Statesman, I love the observation here. And this is going along with the line, Twitter is a far-right social network. Why? Well, because it cannot be controlled, or at least it's not under the control of the censors and the control freaks on the left. Sasha Stone says the way it works is you throw out some dumb word like far right, and the thought robots all fall in line. She says, man, the left used to be so much better than that. It's like straight out of Orwell. And by the way, she's coming at this from the viewpoint of someone who was on the left. And then her eyes have opened and she says, yep, it's not the same thing as it once was. Look, we all have decisions to make. We all have things that will require us to sometimes experience a bit of discomfort in order to do the right thing. The easiest thing in the world is to just simply shut up, do as you're told, keep your head down. Better still, close your door, pull your blinds, and don't pay attention when something bad is happening to someone else. In the long term, though, that costs everybody. And yet we've been trained like a bunch of seals to bark and clap our flippers, when the state flexes its mighty muscles to either pull people back in line or to punish them for standing up to the system. I don't know how to say it any more clearly than this, but sometimes the system is wrong. Sometimes it's dead wrong. And the best thing that we can do is to stand up to it, even if it comes at some personal cost. The thing that you'll find is the people who do stand up are going to be, first of all, vilified. They're going to be questioned and smeared and defamed as, look at them. They're putting the rest of us at risk, and somehow they're making our own lives worse, when in fact they're doing nothing of the kind. They're trying to sound a warning. They're the canary in the coal mine, so to speak. But we're expected, to join in the 2 minutes hate and to denounce them, lest Big Brother feel like maybe he doesn't have our full devotion. I don't know how to encourage people to find the courage to stand up, but I would encourage this. If what you know about people like Sarah Brady, if what you know about people like Ammon Bundy strictly is a product of what was reported to you by the corporate media, you are missing essential pieces of the puzzle. You have been fed a one-dimensional caricature, anti-government activist, anti-vaccine extremist, whatever it is. You're not supposed to listen to them. Have you ever considered going to the source? Sometimes that could mean sitting down and talking to them in person. I know it seems, who has time to do that? Well, I'll tell you who does. People who are actually seeking truth. People who don't want to be spoon-fed, weeks-old pablum from a bunch of spinmeisters who are telling you what you can and cannot think. So basically, the honest in heart are the people who will go to the source and examine these things for themselves. Not a lot of people want to do that, but it still doesn't make it any less the right thing to do. Does it involve a little bit more work? Absolutely. Yes, it does. It's not the path of least resistance and never has been. But it comes down to, how willing are you to allow other people to shape your worldview without putting in some effort to vet things for yourself? For too many people, the answer is, well, I'm more than willing to do that because I'm a busy person. I don't have time. And frankly, it's easier to repeat talking points than it is to actually go find out for myself. Something incredible happens, though, when you are willing to pay the price to know things for yourself. And when you ask, it starts with asking yourself, what do I really know about this person or about this issue that wasn't fed to me by somebody else or told to me by somebody else? And if the answer is not much, be humble enough to admit that maybe I really don't know that much about this particular person or this situation. And again, you can really, if you really want to divide humanity into, neat little categories, the only two that really matter to me are decent and indecent. Decent people do not seek to control others around them. They don't feel like it is their prerogative to tell other people what they must do and to try to punish them if they're not towing the line quickly enough. Indecent people, on the other hand, they live for it. They lust for it. It's their whole purpose for existence. And that's why they love to pile on and, tell you, cry harder, when they see someone saying, hey, this isn't right and it shouldn't be happening. I'll leave it to you to decide which side of that line you would find yourself on. But I'll be very blunt in saying I can't think of a single time in human history where the people who really wanted to control other people, whether it's what they think, what they speak, what they see, or what they do, the people who are seeking control are almost never in the right. In fact, another way of putting it is, if your ideas are so good that they require force, you have really crappy ideas. You should do better. The best ideas are ideas that we're capable of persuading people to voluntarily adopt. And if you can't persuade people, rather than seeking the power of the state to try to bring them in line and, bring them to heel, maybe you should work on getting better ideas or informing yourself at least to the point where you can distinguish between good ideas and bad ideas. All right, I've probably insulted enough people for one moment here. Thanks again for joining us. This is Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.